We are raised to believe that being nice is a virtue. We are taught from a very young age that if we just make everyone else happy, if we look after their needs, if we never rock the boat, we will be loved. We will be valued and we will finally feel like we are enough. But it is a lie. In fact, it is one of the most dangerous psychological traps a human being can walk into. Right now, there are millions of people quietly bleeding their own potential dry because they are addicted to the approval of others. Every time you say yes to someone else, when your entire soul is screaming no, you aren't being kind. You are lying. You are trading away your authenticity for a temporary moment of safety. And the science of human behavior tells us the brutal truth. The more you exhaust yourself trying to fit into everyone else's boxes, the more you reinforce the terrifying internal belief that who you actually are is fundamentally broken. We do not have a lifetime to waste living a version of ourselves that belongs to other people. The clock is running out on your potential. If you want to stop feeling like you are never enough, you have to stop funding your identity with other people's validation. It has to stop today. Most men are conditioned to believe that maintaining the peace is a sign of leadership. Yet we secretly use compliance as a shield to hide our deepest insecurities. We wear a mask of the agreeable coworker, the passive partner, or the flawless friend, because we terrifically fear that showing our raw, unpolished truth will lead to rejection. From a man's perspective, this is a calculated trade-off. We sacrifice our internal authority and genuine voice just to buy a temporary moment of social safety, falsely believing that being liked is the same thing as being respected. Women observe this behavioral pattern and instantly sense a profound lack of grounded masculinity. They do not crave a robot who constantly echoes their opinions or bends to every external pressure. Rather, they look for the emotional stability of a man who stands firmly by his own convictions. When a man constantly shapes himself to please others, a woman feels an underlying current of anxiety, realizing she cannot safely lean on someone who changes his colors depending on who is standing in the room. The psychological consequence of constantly falling into the approval trap is the systematic erosion of a man's internal sense of self-worth. Every time you swallow your true thoughts to avoid a difficult conversation, you are making a devastating internal contract with yourself. You are actively signaling to your own brain that other people's comfort matters more than your own truth, embedding a toxic belief that who you naturally are will never be good enough to stand on its own feet. A man's word is historically his bond, yet a modern masculine crisis has turned our commitments into a desperate plea for validation rather than a statement of intent. We take on extra burdens, sacrifice our private time, and agree to demands that actively drain our focus because we confuse being a reliable provider with being an infinite resource. From a man's psychological perspective, we say yes because we fear that setting a hard limit makes us look weak or unsupportive, forgetting that a commitment made out of fear is not an act of service, but a symptom of compliance. Women can instinctively feel the difference between a generous spirit and a boundaryless man who is running on empty. They do not value a partner who gives pieces of himself away to everyone else until there is absolutely nothing left for the people at home. When a man refuses to protect his own time and energy with a firm, respectful no, a woman perceives not kindness, but a deep-seated hesitation to lead. Realizing that a man who cannot defend his own boundaries can never truly protect theirs, the inherent value of any commitment lies entirely in the weight of the alternative you had the strength to reject. Every single time you offer a hollow yes simply to avoid the temporary discomfort of saying no, you dilute your own currency and reduce your personal authority. You are teaching the world that your boundaries are negotiable. And in doing so, you reinforce the painful internal narrative that your own needs, your own vision, and your own life are entirely secondary to the demands of everyone else. Men often measure their worth by the sheer volume of weight they can carry, mistakenly equating chronic exhaustion with a life of noble purpose. We take pride in running ourselves into the ground, quietly funding everyone else's priorities, businesses, and emotional stability, while our own deepest ambitions sit gathering dust in the corner. From a man's psychological perspective, staying perpetually busy solving other people's problems becomes a brilliant mechanism to avoid the terrifying responsibility of stepping into our own true potential, turning our burnout into a false badge of honor. Women watch this frantic expenditure of energy and recognize the deep tragedy of a man who is burning his own house down to keep the rest of the world warm. They do not want a shell of a man who arrives at the end of the day emotionally bankrupt, physically depleted, and completely detached from his own life. When a man refuses to invest in his own growth, a woman senses that he has traded away his long-term vision for short-term distractions, leaving her to build a life with someone who is always present but never actually there. The metric of an exhausted life reveals a devastating psychological calculation where a man systematically bankrolls others at his own expense. Every single day you spend managing everyone else's crises while ignoring your own calling, you are not exercising strength. You are actively subsidizing your own failure. You are building a world where everyone else wins except the person staring back at you in the mirror, permanently cementing the painful internal belief that your own dreams are simply not worth the investment. A man's psychology is deeply wired to seek external validation as a metric for his internal worth, turning other people's opinions into a mirror that dictates his mood and confidence. We scan the room for nods of approval, chase titles to feel powerful, and look to the reactions of our peers to confirm that we measure up. From a man's perspective, this is a dangerous game of emotional roulette. We grant external forces the absolute power to define our identity, mistakenly believing that if we can just collect enough positive reflections, the deep-seated feeling of inadequacy will finally vanish. Women see right through this performance and recognize the fragile foundation of a man who depends on constant outside reassurance. They are not drawn to a hollow shell that shifts its posture based on the praise it receives. They crave the steady grounding of a man who knows exactly who he is when the lights go down and the crowd goes home. When a man continuously fishes for validation, a woman senses a profound lack of internal security, realizing that his confidence is entirely rented from others rather than owned by himself. The mirror illusion guarantees a permanent state of internal emptiness because it forces a man to look for his value in the most unstable places imaginable. Every time you allow someone else's criticism or praise to determine your self-worth, you hand over the steering wheel of your life to a spectator. You create a psychological trap where you are perpetually chasing an echo, entirely blind to the fact that looking outward for your identity only deepens the toxic belief that your true, unadorned self is never quite enough. Men face a profound psychological crossroads when they must choose between the short-term comfort of popularity and the long-term equity of genuine respect. We often default to being liked because it feels immediate, safe, and validating to our egos, leading us to avoid necessary conflicts and compromise our standards just to keep everyone smiling. From a man's perspective, this hesitation to stand firm stems from a deep fear of isolation. Yet, we fail to realize that when we optimize our behavior to be universally liked, we dilute our leadership and become entirely predictable, harmless, and ultimately uninspiring to those we wish to influence. Women can effortlessly differentiate between a man who is merely nice and a man who possesses the internal fortitude to be respected. They are not looking for an agreeable pushover who constantly bends his values to avoid ruffling feathers. They deeply respect a man who has the courage to hold the line, speak uncomfortable truths, and stand by his principles, even when it makes him unpopular. When a man prioritizes being liked over doing what is right, a woman senses a dangerous lack of backbone. Realizing that a man who cannot withstand a moment of social disapproval can never be trusted to protect anything of true value. The shift toward respect requires a fundamental restructuring of a man's internal motivation, from external applause to internal alignment. Every time you choose the temporary discomfort of setting a high standard over the easy path of compliance, you are actively moving away from the people-pleasing trap. You are demonstrating to yourself and the world that your worth is not up for public auction. Establishing a powerful foundation of self-respect that proves you no longer need the world's permission to be good enough. A man's psychology is fundamentally transformed the moment he realizes that his life is not a script to be performed for others, but a blank page he has the absolute obligation to write himself. For far too long, we allow our childhood, conditioning, societal expectations, and the unceasing demands of our peers to dictate the direction of our ambitions. From a man's perspective, reclaiming this authority requires an intense, often terrifying act of internal defiance, a decision to stop asking for permission to live our own lives, and to finally step into our true calling. We must transition from being passive characters in a narrative written by committee to becoming the unshakable author of our own fate, recognizing that a life lived to fulfill other people's checklists will always leave us hollow. Women possess a powerful, forward-looking perspective that evaluates a man by the clarity and authenticity of his self-authored vision. They do not want to stand beside a man who constantly checks his rearview mirror to see if the crowd approves of his direction. They desire a partner who operates from a place of deep, internally generated purpose. When a man takes full ownership of his path, a woman experiences a profound sense of safety and trust because she can see that his confidence is not a fragile performance designed to win applause, but a solid foundation built on genuine self-knowledge. The ultimate reclamation of your personal authority marks the precise moment you stop funding the toxic illusion that you are never quite good enough. Every single day, you choose to align your daily actions with your deepest internal values. Rather than external expectations, you are actively dismantling the people-pleasing trap. You are finally proving to yourself that your worth is non-negotiable and entirely independent of outside validation, anchoring your identity in a truth that no one else has the power to give or take away.